Well, good morning, everyone. I'm just about to see the clock at the back of the room, so I will try to abide by it. So, Ofsted. Now, can I just check? Have we got anybody in the room who's not from a background in English education? Okay, so you might not know what Ofsted is, so sorry to bore everybody else, but actually you might find this interesting. So most people associate Ofsted with the bit that generally gets us in the news, which, well, at least that used to be the case. The bit that used to get us in the news was routine. I say routine in the best sense of the word, because for the people we are inspecting, for the institution we are inspecting at any particular time, school, a college, an education setting, or indeed a social care setting, it's really, really important. But that part of our work of doing the inspection of an individual education institution only really has impact on the stakeholders of that particular institution, that particular school or college. What we also do, and I guess with our current Chief Inspector, actually what gets us into the news quite a bit as well at a national level, but what we have done really ever since Her Majesty's Inspectors were established in the early years of the 19th century, so we've been around quite a while. I've only been around as an HMI, Her Majesty's Inspector, for 11 years, but actually it seems a lot longer. What we've always done is report to Parliament on the state of education in the country, giving it a national overview. Now, we've been faced, like every other government organisation, Ofsted has been faced with severe budget cuts, and the organisation has had to think about how it prioritises its resources. And what we absolutely have to do is deliver our programme of school and college inspections. And even within that, we've been focusing our resources over the last 4 or 5 years, particularly on schools that are less effective than other schools. So that's where we've been prioritising our resources, which has left few resources available to do other things like the programme of reporting on different subjects nationally, for example. So until 2005, every school report, for example, had a detailed report on each subject in the school, and that stopped in 2005. Realising then that we didn't have information on individual subjects, each subject on the school curriculum got a triennial report. Now, our last one for economics, business and enterprise, which is my subject area, was in 2011. So our evidence was starting to get a little bit stale. So nobody was more surprised than me when last August I think it was, I got told that Ofsted are going to run 3 thematic surveys for schools in this academic year that's just ending, and one of those is going to be on enterprise and employability. And as I say, only running 3, and that's going to be one of them. So this year we've really prioritised as an overall theme looking at what actually goes on in schools. And it is specifically secondary schools that this survey was focused on. Now, what I've discovered from doing this survey is that there's a huge amount of research. In fact, I haven't rediscovered it because I've been involved in this area since the mid-1980s about how we prepare young people for the business world or for vocational world or for just actually what goes on in the adult world after you leave school. We've been through things like economic and industrial understanding, economic awareness, TVEI, the Technical Vocational Education Initiative, and then enterprise was the new buzzword. But they're all hard to pin down, really. So this year it's been interesting to find there's loads of research out there. So what does Ofsted bring to it? What additionally does Ofsted bring to it? Well, I was hoping that by today we would have our report published. But we have a strict reporting schedule in Ofsted so that the publicity doesn't clash. And something overtook this report, which was due to be published, I think, last week. And it's now not being published until mid-September. But I'll speak to Anthony and see if we can get it sent to you as soon as it's published in September. So I'm going to share with you basically what our headlines are. What I'm not allowed to share with you is what the recommendations are we're going to make, but you might be able to infer from what our headlines are, some of them. But this is what we did. This is the extra that maybe that Ofsted brings, because schools don't get to volunteer to take part in our surveys. They get a phone call telling them we're coming. And over the last year, we've carried out, it's a team of inspectors have carried out 41 specific inspections where we go to a school for a day, talk to the head teacher, talk to key staff, but most importantly, talk to pupils and learners in the school about really triangulating whether what the head teachers are telling us and the senior leaders are telling us actually matches up with the real experience on the ground. The schools we went to, those 41, difficult to make it. I mean, we can't make any sort of statistical inferences, but we tried to cover the country. Say the country of England, because Scotland and Wales, Northern Ireland have separate systems. So we're just looking at England and we're just looking at secondary schools. We've been to schools in Cornwall, in Essex, in Kent, in Cumbria, in Cheshire, and in the Midlands and in London, reflecting the diversity of schools and also different quality of schools as judged by Ofsted. And we've supplemented that with all the routine inspections in secondary schools during January and February this year. We asked the lead inspector on those inspections to ask some questions for our survey, and we had 109 contributions from that. So we're getting quite a big evidence base. We also held meetings with our two expert groups, one drawn directly from the world of business and the other drawn from organisations that have expertise in this field. So Anthony contributed a lot, actually, and also had individual meetings with people from different organisations, and it's good to see some of them here today. One of the problems was that there are lots, well, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity, but there are a huge number of organisations involved in supporting schools in this area of work, and it wasn't possible to meet with all of them. So some people have been left out, I'm afraid. But we tried to get representative samples. So you can see that we met with representatives of the CBI, Institute Directors, British Chamber of Commerce, TUC. That was the sort of business end, and then we met with people supporting Employers Education, Founders for Schools, Barclays Life Skills, etc. And the public were invited through Twitter and various social media outlets. And we also have a parent panel in Ofsted. So we got a lot of information from a lot of sources, and 338 responses from Ofsted's parent panel. And what we found is what you really want me to get to, which is this. Okay, so our main findings are, not really a big surprise, the first one, is it? It's hugely variable what goes on in schools. Hugely. And it's all down to whether the head teacher thinks it's important. Well, actually, not just whether the head teacher thinks it's important, because it's rare to find a head teacher who say to you, it's not important, I think it's a really lousy idea. Actually, the issue is whether the head teacher thinks it's important enough to be high on their list of priorities. And so we had different attitudes of head teachers. I went to one school Actually, this wasn't for the survey particularly. It was just a school I was inspecting on a routine inspection, where the governors had made it very clear to the head teacher that they really prioritised business links and preparing their young people for the world of work. And in order to continue with prioritising that on the curriculum, if that meant that other classes had to be made larger, increasing teachers' workload, well, that was something they would have to live with. So that was one end of the scale. And the other end of the scale was the head teacher who said to me, well, we had to get rid of our careers teacher because, to be honest, it's a luxury we couldn't afford. Now, if I tell you that one of those two schools was a high-performing girls', it wasn't a grammar school, it was a comprehensive school, but it was a high-performing single-gender girls' school, and the other one was a much less well-performing mixed comprehensive school, which way round would you think it was? Which would you? Let's have a vote. Let's maybe interactive. Okay, who thinks that the school where we got rid of the careers teacher because it's a luxury we couldn't afford? Who thinks it was the fairly low-performing, mediocre comprehensive school? Okay, a few hands going up. Who thinks it was probably the single-gender girls' school? Okay, that's the majority, isn't it? And the majority, as not for the first time in recent weeks, the majority is wrong. So, yeah, challenge your expectations there. Okay. Now, apprenticeships. I think when we started the survey, there was a view from my leaders that the reason that the uptake of apprenticeships is so poor in this country, particularly with young people, school leavers, is because schools aren't promoting it. Well, we found that actually wasn't really the case. Even it didn't really matter very much whether schools were promoting it or not. Young people didn't want to do it. Was the bottom line. Now, it's a lot more complex than that. What we found was that with 18-year-olds post level 3, school leavers age 18, they actually were looking much more seriously at taking up apprenticeships now than had been maybe a couple of years ago. They are becoming increasingly popular. Still very much a minority, but increasingly popular. But confined to certain sectors. So engineering, accountancy becoming a big one. But in other areas, the students are telling us, well, it's just not appropriate for what I want to do. The opportunities aren't there for what I want to do. The other thing that students were telling us, learners were telling us who are coming up to 18 about apprenticeships was that, yeah, they'd worked out that financially it was the sensible thing to do, but they're worried about missing out on the university experience or what all their peers were doing. And in some locations, you know, I could think of in Suffolk, for example, where students said, well, if I was to do an apprenticeship, I wouldn't be able to do it around here. I'd have to go away to do it. And if I'm going to go away, actually I want to be with other young people, so I'll go to university, where that's where I'll be. So there's lots of issues other than schools aren't promoting them sufficiently. And then at age 16, actually, it becomes even more problematic, because at age 16 there are issues that employers we spoke to said, well, we don't want to take on a 16-year-old because we'd have to look after them. They're not mature enough. So that was coming from the employers that we spoke to. But coming from the young people we spoke to, they didn't feel they were ready. They thought everybody's staying on into education now, so 16 is too young to be going out into the workforce. But also we were picking up that there's huge financial barriers. The rate of pay, you know, one young person said to me, what, you're having a laugh? I get paid more than that for doing a Saturday job, washing the dishes. And we were presenting, and then we discovered that schools were telling us about 16-year-olds who'd got an apprenticeship organised and then found they couldn't take it up because their parents' benefits would be adversely affected, social benefits. So there's a whole range of financial, social, geographical and cultural barriers to taking up apprenticeships. So it's a lot less simple than maybe we thought it was going to be. Employers, we talked to lots of employers, actually when we were out doing our survey, and employers want employees who are confident communicators, who possess a range of skills, such as teamworking, risk management, creativity, initiative, organisation, plan, the things we talk about as being enterprise. There's no surprise there, is it? But what they were also telling us was that that's what schools' qualifications don't deliver. And that's a big controversial issue. And I'll just leave that at that point, because that's could be an interesting issue for us to grapple with when the report's published. Whoops, sorry. 5 minutes. Yeah, okay. Really already talked about that one. I think I may have duplicated the slide. My apologies. Right. Now, we also found, of course, looking at the things that have been published, that employers have been very critical, and employers' organisations have been very critical at what's coming out of schools, and say it's lack of experience is the biggest barrier. Well, yeah, absolutely. The problem is that employers really have to take some of the responsibility. You can't lay it all on education, because, lovely statistic here, 2/3 of employers say work experience is critical, significant factor in their recruitment. But I think this is in London, just 19% of employers, yes, in the capital, offer work experience placements to young people. And we found that as we went around the country. The employers we tended to meet were the ones that had the contacts with schools, but they're saying, but we're the only ones in our industrial estate that do it. What about all the rest? Poor communication and a lack of clarity over what is wanted, common barrier. So schools don't really understand business, business don't really understand schools. And it's actually difficult to bring people together, because people out in business are trying to run their company. People in schools have got a teaching programme. And so it works best when there's people with the time to make these communications. So when there's a non-teaching member of staff, as there was in some of the schools we visited, a non-teaching member of staff who's got this speciality, this special area of responsibility, and is available for most of the day to make contacts with the schools. And then our last, what? No, I think I've got 12 slides. Schools have been slow to embark on the work-related requirements of the 16 to 19 study programmes. Now that's basically about sixth forms, school sixth forms. School sixth forms should be offering study programmes containing an element of work-related learning appropriate for the career plans of learners. But quite a lot of the schools we went into, they were just offering a diet of 3 A-levels and think they'd done their bit, and this has all kind of passed them by. And this is very much being focused on in our inspector training at the moment, to not let schools get away with this when we're inspecting the sixth forms. Even where, this is a big point I'd like to make, even where schools provide a lot of activity to promote enterprise and employability, they very rarely check on the progress that pupils are making. They very rarely have a clear, coherent set of what they want, the skills, the knowledge, the understanding that they want pupils and learners to have. And because of that, they don't check it, whether they're getting it or not. And so the main weakness in enterprise education provision was a lack of coherence and a failure to identify and assess learning outcomes. As I said to head teachers, okay, you're spending actually quite a bit of time on this, that's great. But what other area of the curriculum would you not bother to find out whether you're wasting your time or not? I'll leave it at that point. Questions?